What's the connection between humor and healing? Not just emotionally, but in the hospital too. Humor is like a sixth sense, and our bodies crave it as much as our minds. And using humor effectively in communication can make us look smarter, more considerate, and more appealing. My guest today has spent 20 years researching and sharing the origins of humor, how to use it effectively, and how it affects the body. We'll share laughter and insight with certified speaking professional and registered nurse Karen Buxman, right after my public speaking tip of the week, here on Full Speech Ahead, so stay tuned.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last!
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
We've got to take the neighborhood back.
So my children will not be afraid to say the word AIDS when I am gone.
Each one of you has your own platform. Mine is a stage in a studio. Yours is wherever you are.
Welcome to Full Speech Ahead, the program where we look at communication in all its many facets with an emphasis on the spoken word. I'm your host, public speaking coach Milo Shapiro from publicdynamics.com. Before we get to my guest today on the power of humor in our bodies and in communication, here's my public speaking tip of the week. One of our ongoing worries is getting tongue-tied and tripping on the words we have to say in front of our audiences. In my coaching, I often talk about a pendulum swing, where once we push ourselves to do something at a 10, it's easier to do it at a 6, even if our comfort zone is a 3. This applies to speaking as well. If you're concerned about tripping on a simple speech, imagine how much harder it would be to do it if it was full of tongue twisters. Better yet, don't imagine it, do it. Warm up by doing a long list of tongue twisters. I can email you the list I use if you contact me. Then, after doing the tongue twisters, go back and try the opening of your simple speech again. I bet you're going to find it way easier by comparison. This is going to ease your stress, and you're likely to do better. Okay, on with this week's interview. My guest today is Karen Buxman, and I'm going to say right off that that is spelled K-A-R-Y-N for those of you who may want to visit KarenBuxman.com afterwards. Karen transitioned from nursing to public speaking when she realized she didn't have to put in 12-hour shifts, didn't have to handle bodily fluids, and could instead get standing ovations. Through her 20 years of research and experience, along with the notorious Patch Adams and neuroscientist researchers, she's concluded that humor is not only funny, but it can help lead an audience toward a positive, healthy, and happy life. Her audiences are diverse. In 1 month, she spoke for the Mayo Clinic, Pfizer, the Association for Operating Room Nurses, the Air Force, and the $1 Million Roundtable. Her clients hire Karen to entertain, educate, and inspire their audiences over and over again. She's addressed thousands of audiences around the world with groups as small as 10 and as large as 10,000. Whatever the topic, Karen's inspirational, entertaining, and practical messages bring audiences to their feet. Karen says her mission in life is to improve global health through laughter and to heal the humor impaired. We all know a few of them. As for her credentials, Karen Buxman isn't just a certified speaking professional, which I might mention is not easy to get, but she's also a recipient of the CPAE, the Council of Peer Awards for Excellence, which means her peers think she's really, really good too. And I can tell you as a fellow member of the National Speakers Association, there's only about 100 CPAEs in the country. So I'm really honored to have Karen with me today. Karen, welcome to Full Speech Ahead.
Thank you for the invitation. I have so been looking forward to this because between the two of us, man, we got a ton of stuff to share with your listeners. So this is going to be fun for us, and it's going to be awesome for them.
And I'm just as excited because having spoken to with you in the past and having worked with you, I know you've got a lot to share. And humor is a big area that people have a lot of different feelings and different backgrounds with. So let's start with this one. before you were doing all the research, before you were involved in applying it the way you do, how did you find humor important just using it on a day-to-day basis as a nurse?
I actually did start out considering this as an implementation when I was a nurse, as you mentioned. I would work with my patients, and I would find that they were more receptive to um, my taking care of them. I mean, goodness, if you're walking in with a syringe, you want a nurse who's got a smile on her face, right? it's, it's like, I got something for you.
Depending where she's it, even more so.
Yeah, yeah. I was also a teacher of nursing, and I found that my students were more receptive. I found family members more receptive. I found relationships with my patients and their family members to be much better. And so I started looking at this perhaps as something more than just accidental. And when I went back to graduate school and had an opportunity to do research and a thesis, I started looking into perhaps researching this as something that was more than just a passing fancy. How could we look at this as something beneficial to people? And at the time, back in the late 80s, there had not been much research done on this area other than some of the work by Norman Cousins. And when I started looking into this and realizing how much more there was, it just became so exciting that I realized that this was my calling. And many people are fortunate enough early in life to find their calling. Sometimes it's later in their lives, and there are still a few of those who are out there still searching for their calling.
At 85.
But I realized that really this is how I want to spend my life, showing people how they can use humor strategically to improve their health, to improve their business, and to improve their relationships. And so that's my mission, and this is what I'm set to do, and this is why I want so much to talk with you and your listeners today.
Now, I know because you're going back quite a ways on this, and with Patch Adams and all of those different aspects being applied, people see the value, I think, a little bit more. But early on, did you get people saying, I can't take you seriously talking about humor, especially when you're talking about people's health?
You should have seen me trying to convince my advisors when I went to them and said, I think I'm going to research humor. They said, yeah, right. They actually wanted me to study the locus of control of eating disorders of adolescent children.
That sounds funny.
Yeah. And I said, no. I'm very serious about this. And so they said, shoot us a proposal. And when we started looking into this, their excitement started growing as well, and more people started jumping on the bandwagon, and I had more and more people saying, well, what are you finding, and what's your research show? And that's actually how I fell into the world of speaking, because as I started sharing my findings, originally my first presentation was truly intended to be an academic presentation discussing the p-value of less than 0.05, and I discovered that people thought I was funny. It was like, who knew? So as people started asking me to share my findings, eventually that began snowballing so quickly that I had to make a choice between teaching nursing and practicing hands-on nursing to going out into the speaking world. And still much of my audience is the healthcare audience, but I also have the opportunity to speak to corporations and associations and women's groups and patient groups and lay people. I mean, it's a very diverse topic, because I don't necessarily have a niche like some people do in terms of, I speak to people in the grocery industry, or I speak to people who are in the construction industry. My niche is more a topic than it is a group of people.
Because almost any profession can find a way to say more humor is going to help people get along better. It's going to help make the message get across more clearly, stick in people's minds. Do you find that when you use humor, people remember more of what you have to say?
Oh, so much so. And that was something, again, that I learned early on, even before I started researching this. I recall one time when I was in a classroom setting and I was teaching a group, and we were in a room that had no windows, and it's nice and hot, and everybody is just about to go into a coma. And at one point I made a joke about a topic, and it was both verbal and nonverbal. I was discussing a topic that was something that only a nurse could love, orthostatic hypotension.
Fun.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I knew
But
what it was, I'd find it fun anyway.
basically what it is fainting. And at one point I just started kind of mocking and yelling out, okay, your brains are yelling, Mayday, Mayday, all systems down. And I collapsed onto the floor like Lucille Ball.
I'm sure
And
they keep coming.
everybody, yeah, they all shot up in their chairs. They all started laughing. But I remember the following week when I gave a test, one by one, I heard people murmuring around the room, Mayday, Mayday, and not a single person missed that question. And it was then that I realized not only did I get them laughing, I got them listening, and that there was a hook. And, this is part of what I want to talk to you and your listeners about today is that, at that point in time, I fell upon it accidentally. But what I want to talk to people is how can they be more strategic about it? Because so many times we fall into humor. You're watching something on television and it makes you laugh and you know that it feels good. Or somebody in the office says something funny and you chuckle and that makes you feel good. And you do get benefits when that happens. But instead of just letting you have those occasional benefits, how can we ramp that up by using humor strategically and having the humor be by choice rather than be by chance?
But talk about that a little bit. Humor by choice rather than by chance. Because I think people think, well, funny people are just going to make funny things happen. But humor by choice means you're planning it's going to be in there, and it runs that risk of feeling forced. So how do you use humor by choice?
Right, because, sometimes it can feel a bit staged and, I'm not opposed to carrying a sign around that says, applause.
Oh, you have one of those? I could really use it sometimes.
Or laugh here because
Yes.
Occasionally they don't laugh, and on those occasions when they don't laugh, that's when I say, okay, that's the last time I buy a joke from Milo Shapiro, but anyway.
Now, I may have helped you, but I don't think I've ever sold you a joke.
No, you've never sold me a joke, but you have helped me a lot. And yes, you're right. At times it can come across as staged if people, I guess, try too hard. But what I'm talking about is how can you create some opportunities in your day? How can you weave in some opportunities, whether it's in a meeting or whether it's after work or whether it's with your family? Because it doesn't have to be something like being a stand-up comic. When I'm talking about weaving humor in strategically, it's making a commitment. If I want to be healthier, I'm going to make sure that at least 3 to 5 times a week, I TiVo and then watch something that makes me laugh instead of focusing on the 6 o'clock evening news where I get to hear about, murders and mayhem and rape and all these wonderful things that really cause such negative effects physically that you're not even aware of. And I know that we're not really going to spend a lot of time going in that direction, although if people are interested in that, there's more information with some of the resources that we'll give them later. But in the work setting, to know that, okay, I'm going to be having a meeting. I want to make sure that there's going to be an opportunity where I can inject a humorous story, or in my slide presentation that I can inject something that's going to be maybe a slide or an exercise that's going to lighten up the moment. How can I make sure that these kinds of things are included in my repertoire strategically and purposefully, and not just wait for them to happen accidentally? We're going to go into more detail in that in just a second here.
Yeah, I want to ask you more about how we can use humor to enhance communication, whether it's in the workplace or in our relationships. And I want to address that as soon as we get back in about 30 seconds from this message here on Full Speech Ahead.
Not another boring conference.
Liven it up with IMPROVentures and the fun of improvisation. Check out motivational speeches and entertainment that get everyone learning through play and laughter. For smaller groups, Teamprovising is our teamwork and communication program with more feedback and fun. Plus public dynamics, keynotes, training, and coaching on public speaking skills. You can be more effective in front of groups. Learn more today.
IMPROVentures, 619-542-0761, or see videos at IMPROVevents.com.
We are back with Karen Buxman. If you just tuned in, Karen Buxman is a former registered nurse. Actually, are you still a registered nurse, Karen?
I am still a registered nurse. Yeah, I have a license and everything.
So she keeps it alive, but she doesn't work in the operating room because she's too busy talking the message of how we incorporate. There's one of those unintended humor moments. Incorporate humor into our lives for our health and for also improving our lives in lots of other ways. And one of the ways is in communicating more effectively with others. So that's where we left off before the break. Karen, how would one use humor to enhance communication?
Great question, Milo. There's three primary areas that I think would be of interest to your listeners, and those three areas are sharing information, negotiation, and dealing with difficult people. So let me start just by saying a few words about using humor when you're sharing information. Whether you're a boss or a teacher or even a parent, or a family member, we're dealing with sharing information all day long. And many times it's trying to get someone's attention because oh my gosh, this is such an information-rich society. And
it can be overwhelming to have that much information coming at you all the time.
Overload. And so, imagine getting just piles and piles of paper all the time. And how do you get people to read through them? How do you get people's attention? How do you really get them to hear you above the rest of the noise that's in their heads and in their world? And what we found is that if you can get people listening or if you can get people laughing, you can get people to listen. And so just some of the quick strategies that I encourage people to do, like with emails, is to incorporate some kind of a funny quote or some kind of a funny saying or a little joke or something at the end of your email, so that people, at least are going to hang in there, and if nothing else, they'll scroll to the bottom to see what kind of funny thing that you said. In memos, if you can include something that's a cartoon or something, again, that's a humorous anecdote of some kind. Research has shown much more likely that people will look at something if it shows that there's some kind of a funny visual or they think that there's going to be a funny payoff. Anytime that you can lighten up that information with just a little bit of humor, people are going to pay more attention. And what it does also is it gives them a hook to go back to remember and retain that information. And there's a lot of studies being done right now by people in the field of, get this, psycho-neuro-immunology.
Doesn't sound funny.
Yeah, which we just refer to as P&I shorthand. And what they find is that really people are remembering more when it is in conjunction with humor.
You shared a story with me the last time we spoke about something you said, and the reason and the way you made it funny, people kept referencing it through the rest of a conference or something like that.
Oh, I was talking to a classroom one time, and we were in a classroom setting, and it's this stuffy, it's hot, it's summer, there's no windows. You wouldn't even know if a nuclear bomb had gone off outside. It was after lunch, and everybody was just in a coma. And I was trying to teach something as exciting as orthostatic hypotension.
I just fell asleep. What?
Yeah, on a good day, not funny. And so when I realized I was losing 100% of them, I kicked into humor mode, and I started just making a joke about it. And I started mocking and saying, "Mayday, mayday, the brain is yelling, all systems down, mayday." And then I collapsed on the floor.
You just lay down on the floor in the middle of your speech?
I just like plopped onto the floor, and everybody at that point, I definitely captured their attention, and they all started laughing. And so their energy level was back up, their awareness was back up. But what I found out later was that as I was giving the test a week later, when everybody got to question 28 on orthostatic hypotension, I would hear this murmuring around the room, Mayday, Mayday.
So they made the
You know,
association, and it helped them remember the information.
they all remember, not a single person in the classroom missed that question.
How interesting.
And that was when I realized, okay, we've created a hook here, and this is something that's very important when you're trying to get people to remember something. So using humor to share information, very, very important.
I find also that people treat an opportunity to laugh as a treat, and it's kind of like, I almost like throwing the fish to the dolphins at SeaWorld. They look forward to that next time that they're going to be thrown a treat, and not that I want to compare my audiences to dolphins eating fish necessarily, but there is something about, oh, maybe he's going to say something funny again. I'm going to continue to pay attention because I don't want to miss the next treat if I'm daydreaming and everybody else laughs and I miss that chance.
Right. Just in case, he may throw us, and you're absolutely right. And if you do interject humor, periodically, and about every 7 minutes is a good rule of thumb because of attention spans, to at least change up the energy of your audience, then this is a great direction to go. So sharing information is important. Negotiation, what I want to say, we're negotiating all the time, whether you're a salesperson or whether you're a parent of a 5-year-old. I'm telling you what, 5-year-olds are the best negotiators in the world. But what studies have shown in negotiation is that when two people are negotiating over something in particular that they both want, the person who is using humor is more likely to get what they're negotiating for. Now, that being said, the humor does need to be somewhat relevant. If you are in the midst of an intense negotiation, whether it's over the price of the house you want to buy or a contract or whatever, you can't just stop in the middle of it and go, oh my gosh, I should be using humor. All right, why'd the chicken cross the road? It's got to be a little bit relevant. But if you can weave in some humorous comments, and again, these don't have to be laugh out loud comments. These can be just mildly funny comments or self-effacing comments about yourself. And there is a direct ratio. The longer your humor comment is, the funnier it needs to be. So if it's just a one-liner or even a couple of words, people will respond to that. They'll recognize that as humor, and then you can move on. So sharing information, negotiation, and then dealing with difficult people. Oh my gosh, who hasn't had to deal with a difficult person? And when you're dealing with difficult people, there's actually 4 different ways that you can truly deal with a difficult person. When they're being hostile, when they're being angry, when they're complaining about something, you can, deal with them very seriously and sincerely, straight on. You can refuse to deal with them. You can just turn around and walk off. You can pretend to deal with them. Doctors and lawyers are great at this. They throw in the legalese, they throw in the medicalese, and they get people so confused that they think the question was answered, and they leave going, what just happened? But the other choice is you can diffuse a situation with humor. And the purpose of the humor isn't just to get the other person laughing so hard that they're distracted and don't notice that you're making a break for it. What you're really trying to do is just buy yourself a few moments of time to regain your footing, to get the other person maybe a little bit off center, and then meet that other person's needs. And all 4 of these are legitimate means of dealing with a difficult person. You have to use your discernment because all of these can work. It's just that not all of them will work every single time. But if you're using humor to diffuse a situation, then again, by buying yourself a little bit of time and not trying to get into a power struggle, one of the things that I recommend to people is, a lot of times you're dealing with a difficult person. You know that sometimes that they're a difficult person. They're the complainer, they're the whiner, they're the one who always finds something wrong with something. Many times they'll throw out something that's called the hostile question. And the hostile question is when somebody throws a question out that they don't want an answer to. They just want you to know they're unhappy, they're cranky, they're whining. And so
What would be an
what you
example of that? Just so I make sure I'm following you.
a hostile question would be something like, well, who died and made you boss?
Oh, yeah, no answer to that one.
Yeah, that's or whose budget is this coming out of? And then rolling their eyes at you. So a lot of times it's not that they really expect you to have the true answer, but they do want you to know, golly, I'm really unhappy with what you're telling me right now. So one of the exercises that people can do to use humor strategically, purposefully, to increase and empower themselves is to think ahead of time. What kinds of situations might I run up against? What kinds of hostile questions might I hear? And then come up with a list of humorous responses. And I always tell people, come up with at least 10. Because the first one or two that you come up with, and this works well either by yourself or even better as a group exercise in the office, but the first couple you come up with, oh my gosh, they're going to be so funny, and they're going to get you in so much trouble.
Yeah, I'm thinking of all those things that I shouldn't say that do get me in trouble. But maybe as you work your way down the list, you're coming up with some that you could get away with that could lighten the moment.
Exactly. And you have to know your audience. But when I've done this exercise with groups before, one group who said, one of their problems was, for someone who always said, well, who died and made you boss? And one of them came up with the savor line, oh, haven't you read the memo? Or for the person who said, well, whose budget is this coming out of? They, very dramatically looked around the room and said, well, who's not here? We'll take it out of their budget. And so those are the kinds of things that, okay, you disarm the other person momentarily, you get a chuckle, and then you address the problem. So this is one of the ways that you can use humor strategically, whether you're imparting information, whether you're negotiating, or whether you're dealing with a difficult person.
I think also not only does it buy you time, but it takes that moment it takes the person out of the moment of the issue and reminds them we're just people trying to do the best we can here. If you can make each other laugh a little bit or make light of it, it humanizes the moment. And I think we lose sight of that when it's that person who's doing it to me versus it's someone over there who has their needs and is trying to get their work done, and at the moment it's at odds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right on.
You were talking about appropriateness of humor, and that can be such a challenging one. When we last worked together, you were about to go overseas. When you tell the story.
Well, I had an opportunity to speak to 5,000 people in Bangkok, and none of them spoke English.
That's a little different than your regular audience.
A little different. And they, 36 countries, and they were going to be interpreting it into 7 different languages simultaneously while I was speaking. And, on the one hand, I was very excited about this, but on the other hand, as any sane person would be, I was also a bit alarmed. And so, yeah, I really had to think about, well, how can I make sure that this humor translates across, different kinds of groups. We're talking about different countries here, different ethnic backgrounds here. And then this was when, I sought out your help and expertise, which was just so helpful.
Oh, thank you.
Because so much of my humor was based on wordplay. And, when you're talking, especially to a group that maybe is from a different background, their understanding of of the wordplay is very different than what you might be saying. For instance, one of the phrases I might have used was, well, have you ever put your foot in your mouth? Well, anybody here in the U.S. would know what that means. But for somebody who is not speaking English, while you're trying to move on and be funny, they've still got this picture of you with your foot sticking in your mouth.
Especially if you're working with a translator and he's literally been told that, so there isn't any implication that there's an idiom.
Exactly. And so, what you and I did was go through this entire speech and look at, okay, what are these phrases that, are very funny to us, but don't make sense to another audience. One of the stories that I was telling was a story about Southwest Airlines. And I was talking about a phrase that I'd heard a flight attendant say that goes back to a Simon and Garfunkel song. There may be 50 ways to leave your lover, but there's only 4 ways to leave this plane. Really funny if it's a group here in the U.S. who's familiar with Simon and Garfunkel. But to be honest, an Asian speaking group or somebody that's not familiar with that song. And right now, to be quite honest, we're talking also about age differences in my American audiences who've never heard of 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. How else might we communicate that humor? And so it becomes much more important in those particular situations to focus not just on your verbal communication, but really think in terms of your nonverbal. And that was something that was very, very helpful, that you brought out the best in me. It's like, it was there.
It was a question of finding the more universal things. And I think that's what made it all work, was we figured out what really is something that's the human experience rather than a nursing experience or an American experience. And so much of what we did that with was with your face and your body. You started really conveying what was funny, and that this is a funny moment, which you may not have gotten from the words otherwise, by the way you expressed it.
Right. I remember one particular phrase that I was thinking about, and it was a phrase where people who amuse themselves, and I said something to the effect, well, people who amuse themselves think, oh, I'm so funny, and you really helped me exaggerate that with, I'm sorry that your listeners can't see us right now because I would show them, but it was a very dramatic of tipping my head back and forth and exaggerating the phrasing of, oh, I'm so funny, and then to have the audience or the listener looking back at me and thinking, no, you're not, and it's just that rhythmic, I'm so funny, no, you're not, but also the tossing of the head back and forth and the really widening of the eyes and the showing the smile that would indicate to the audience that, I'm having fun with this comment, and that even if you don't get the exact translation of this, that you're going to get a sense of it even through the nonverbal that I'm doing.
Yeah, it conveys that experience, which brings me to another question. How is humor different when it's verbal versus written? Because you lose all of those things. And I know sometimes when I've seen very funny stand-up comedians and I read their books, I have to kind of picture them saying it to try and even bring the humor back to it. So how is it different in verbal versus written, and how do you make it work?
Oh, I'm telling you, boy, that is such a great question. And one of the people that comes to mind, I don't know if you've ever read or heard the works of David Sedaris, who is one of my favorite authors. And I'd read his books for a couple of years and found him to be entertaining. And then I purchased the CD David Sedaris Live at Carnegie Hall, and I got his voice in my head. And I mean, I actually listened to that, to talk about strategic humor. I took the recording of that and listened to it on my iPod while I was having a root canal, and laughed so hard during the root canal. Boy, you don't have to make this stuff up. I laughed so hard during the root canal that 3 times the dentist had to stop because I was biting him because I was laughing so hard. But now when I read David Sedaris, I don't even need to hear him, because now I hear his voice in my head and I know what his intonations are. But that really brought home the importance of hearing it versus reading it. And I think that sometimes this can be a double-edged sword too, because I have known people who have tried to write a memo or an email, and they thought that what they were writing came across as obviously funny, and instead the other person totally missed the intended humor and took it instead as being offensive or something that was being sarcastic or put down. So I think it's much harder to be humorous in the written word than it is in being, verbal, because verbal people can hear your intonation, and and especially if they can see you, because then you have not only the verbal, you have the nonverbal, you have the expressions, and so there is a big difference. So when you are trying to convey your humor in the written form, if at all possible, I would run it past a second person until you really know you've got the hang of it, because it is something that's much harder to master than the verbal humor.
I know that I've been accused by a number of people of putting too many smiley faces in my emails. But my answer is always, I would rather err on the side of that than not have people think I said that last thing with a light tone. I'm not really, upset about that. It's just getting down to the fact, because that levity of just seeing a little smiley face there is like, hey, but everything's okay.
I'm totally with you. I know there are people who are totally opposed to emoticons, but I think that I'm with you. I would rather err on the side of throwing an emoticon in and having somebody maybe roll their eyes than having somebody be upset with me because they misread the intention of my note.
Yeah, it's a horrible feeling to have to backpedal. I did it just the other day with someone. I had to write back to her immediately, say, I was kidding. I really meant nothing by that. And then she said, oh, okay. But I hope she believed me after the fact. It's a tough place to be. When we come back from our next break, I'm going to ask Karen a question I wouldn't ask anyone else, but she's going to understand what the answer to this question is. And Karen, the question is, what's so funny about diabetes?
Okay.
And I know you know the answer to that question, and we're going to address that as soon as we come back after 30 seconds from our next break on Full Speech Ahead.
Got photos that need improvement? Freshen your photo. Old family shots that have gotten damaged? Freshen your photo. Want someone or something removed from a picture? Freshen your photo. At freshenyourphoto.com, we turn the pictures you have into the pictures you want. Add muscle, lose weight, lighten face lines, whiten teeth, fix darker off-color shots. See before and afters from dozens of happy customers at freshenyourphoto.com. That's freshenyourphoto.com.
We are back on Full Speech Ahead with my guest, Karen Buxman, registered nurse, but also public speaker, helping the audience to heal through humor, making people laugh about all kinds of things. And the question I teased you with before we left is, what's so funny about diabetes? And I know the answer to that question, but you give us the background on why that question actually makes sense in your life.
The answer to that is, well, absolutely, there's nothing really funny about diabetes. But the point that I make in this book is that while we can't control many of the circumstances in our life, we can control the response in our life. And
I want to mention that that's the title of a book, because we hadn't said that.
Yeah, that is a title. The first in a series, actually. I was approached by a company wanting to know if I could give them some material on humor for chronic illnesses. And, the biggest one we started with was diabetes. And there's actually a lot of research that shows that humor and laughter actually have some very positive effects for people both with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And so we put this book together not as a joke book, but this again is, how do you apply humor strategically to help improve your health? And so whether you're a diabetic, a pre-diabetic, or a cheerleader of a diabetic, or a person with diabetes, as we prefer to say, this is a book that can show you how to, again, strategically use this to decrease your stress, to increase. The studies show that, when people use humor strategically, for instance, with diabetes, they lower their blood sugar, which is a problem. They lower their renin, which is one of the harmful chemicals in your body that damage your kidneys. And this is why many times diabetics have problems with kidney disease or renal failure. For people with diabetes, or for really almost anybody, it lowers the bad cholesterol. It raises the good cholesterol. It decreases the harmful chemicals that come from stress. And so, what's so funny about diabetes? Well, really not too much, unless a diabetic walks into a bar. We can go with the bar jokes, but
The rabbi and the duck.
Exactly. But we can show different ways. And so, from there came the book, well, what's so funny about heart disease, and other books to come in the series. What's so funny about cancer? What's so funny about Parkinson's? What's so funny about depression? Now, that may be 140 blank pages. I'm not sure.
But good.
Yeah, but the truth is that whatever our given situation is, it may not be funny at the time. And how many times have you and I both said, someday we're going to laugh about this?
Yeah.
Because at the time, something may not be funny at all. And what I have found in my life's research is that for most adults, most of our humor, to be totally honest, comes from pain and discomfort. I mean, think about it. What is it that we're laughing about during the day? Is it the fact that we bought a brand new car? No. Is it the fact that we got a great raise? I don't think so. The things that we laugh about are the things that make us crazy. And so the good news is we got more material than we could ever use in a lifetime.
I know that as a motivational speaker, you'll relate to when I say that almost anytime something goes wrong and it's really big, you can go, oh, there's a good story in this.
Exactly. I mean, it's like, once the initial pain is over, you're going, oh, yay! More material. Oh.
One of my clients was giving a speech. He's a researcher on Lou Gehrig's disease, and he had seen my website and how much humor was involved in my background in improv. And one of the very first things he said walking in the door is, "This is on Lou Gehrig's disease. There is no room for humor in this hour-long presentation." And I thought to myself, he's not ready to hear otherwise, so I'm just going to let that go. But after I'd won his confidence over the course of the first 2 visits, I said, I want to revisit that topic. I am not saying we make fun of Lou Gehrig's disease.
Right.
Can we make jokes about stereotypes about researchers? Oh, yeah, we're a really strange bunch. And he started telling me, great. Can we make jokes about mistakes that were made along the way in trying to find cures? Oh, my gosh, you should hear some of the things we thought, and then we discovered we were completely off. So he started to see there was room for humor without making fun of the disease itself. One of the things I wanted to ask you about the book is it all for the patients, or is it also geared for the caretakers? Because I would think humor is critical for them.
Absolutely. And again, the book is for either the person with diabetes or the cheerleader, whether it's the caregiver, the wife, the spouse, the girlfriend, the boyfriend, the parent, the child. This book can be a guideline for any of the above. And you're so right on. I mean, I love your example about the guy with Lou Gehrig's, and I just saw just the most amazing example just a couple of weeks ago from a speaker who has Parkinson's, and we were actually participating at a continuing education group for speakers on how to be more humorous. Those of us who are humorous, still we've got room to learn. And he got up there with a microphone and he shuffled up there and needed help standing up on the stage, and his hand was shaking. And I was thinking, this is just a train wreck waiting to happen. And he started talking, and he had the room laughing so hard they were crying. I remember one of the things he said was, my hand shakes so bad. The good news is I can write my own prescriptions. And I mean, there was such great self-effacing humor. And, he was never saying that, Parkinson's is a funny disease, but you look at the fact that, how do we deal with the situation that goes along with having the disease? And it can be a wonderful, wonderful coping mechanism when you give yourself permission. Now, I will say that sometimes people are too close to the pain. When I say that humor comes from pain, when do we find something funny? Well, when we can emotionally detach. And if you are totally enmeshed in the pain right at that moment, you're not going to find anything funny. So some time does have to elapse, or some distance has to elapse. But once you can start to emotionally detach from that pain and let it go, then you're going to be able to start reframing it. And that's part of, again, being strategic, being proactive. Can you shorten that time frame? If you've ever found yourself saying, oh my gosh, someday we're going to laugh about this, can we shorten the time frame a little bit and start thinking, well, what is funny about this? And how can we exaggerate it or downplay it or twist it or turn it and see it from a different perspective? Because once you can master that, now you're going to be healthier. Now your business is going to be more profitable. Now your relationship with another person is going to be richer, because humor is power. And this is really, really, really the takeaway that I hope people realize, whether it's the power for your business, whether it's empowerment for yourself, whether it's empowering your relationship, humor is power. And so you don't want to just let this go off on its own and not try to harness this power, because you can use this to your advantage. So this is why I get so excited about this.
You once said to me that someone said to you, do you need to be funny if you're up on stage? And you said, only if you want to get paid. And I think that's a great mindset, is that if audiences are going to enjoy you, it's going to be good for you. And yet that's not everyone's forte. There's a heck of a lot of people listening going, yeah, that's great, but I'm not funny. And I know that I tend not to believe that's true. I tend to believe people don't know how to express what they see as the humor in them in the right ways to make it work. But I always learn from new people. And for you, what can you recommend to help people be funnier?
Well, the first thing I would recommend is hire Milo Shapiro.
And you were funny when I met you.
But and really, I mean, whether it's somebody who is from novice to expert, I have to say I have seen you work masterfully with people. So I just, I really, I'm not worthy. You are a masterful person at that. But when you're not around and it's just me, I do have a few tips for people. When I'm talking to my audiences, and I do get this a lot, people will say, and this is why now I incorporate it in my presentations, because people would come up to me afterwards and go, well, this is great for you. You're funny. But what about me? I'm not funny. Can you help me be funny? And the truth is, you and I can both help people be funnier. And it's true, if you are a speaker, you do want to be funnier if you want to get paid. But, for the person who is not necessarily a performer, here's the great news. You don't have to be funny. You just have to see funny. And how can you do that? Again, it's the lens of humor with what you do. If your expectation is, well, there's nothing funny happening in my life, or there's nothing funny happening where I work, well, you know what? You're gonna be right. But if your expectation is, well, what am I missing? What am I overlooking? I know something funny has got to be going on somewhere. You're gonna be right. And so it's raising your awareness, raising your expectation, because once you start really looking, once you start really listening, now you're going to start seeing things and you're going to start hearing things that everybody else is missing. And so this is really the first wonderful step. The second step is don't let it get away. So many times we hear something funny or we see something funny, and then I don't know about you, but man, my memory span is that of a goldfish. It's scary. So I write things down, or even better these days, I mean, what did we do before our phones became so smart?
Absolutely.
I constantly have my voice memo on, or I'm taking pictures of things constantly, of signs, of funny things, or of bloopers in the newspaper, or things that I overheard someone say, because the humor really is going on all around us. It's just that so many times we're overlooking it. So to capture it, and then to make sure that strategically we are incorporating that and sharing it with another person. A quick story, a nurse friend of mine who was working with hospice and home health patients came across a situation that is not that infrequent for those of us that work with patients, and they are so grateful that they want to give us something. And sorry to say, we have to turn down checks, jewelry, and cars and things of unspeakable value. But the thing that she said to her patient that was, I thought, just mildly brilliant was she said, one of the things that I really value is humor. And so I'm going to see you every week for the next 6 weeks. When I come to see you again, if you could share with me something humorous that you've seen or something funny that you've seen or a joke that you've found, that would be a real gift to me. And instead of just being a gift to her, it was a gift to that person, because now they changed their filter. Now they raised their awareness. Now they were looking for humor. And the next week when she came, not only did they have something to share with her, but they remarked how much better the quality their entire week had been because their outlook had been different. And so when you realize you don't have to be funny, you just have to see funny, it's going to change the entire quality of your life.
Oh, I love that, because what happened was it changed the way they looked at the world. They looked at the world as, what's funny that I'm ready to see? And once they were in a mind frame of open to that, that's what the universe gave them. And it probably they probably had to choose by the end of the week which thing they were going to tell, because they were in that mindset of letting funny in. I love that.
And so really you get the double bang for your buck, I think, when you're collecting the humor. When you share it with another person, now you're getting to enjoy it all over again, and the other person's getting to enjoy it. So again, you are getting the double bang for your buck, and that's one of the things about being strategic, is not only collecting the humor, but then sharing your humor. And if you're a business person, how can you share the humor with your colleagues or with your clients or with your customers? If you're a nurse, how can you share it with your patients? If you're a parent, how can you share it with your child? If it's in your church, how can you share it with your fellow parishioners or members? It's something that, again, be proactive. Don't just let it happen by chance.
And if you get a laugh from one person, make a memory of it, because when they're not around, you can tell that same story over and over again. You found one of your key moments that can make people laugh. Karen, the time has flown by, and I've enjoyed it as much as I expect to, but I really wanted to thank you again for being a guest on Full Speech Ahead.
Woohoo!
Woohoo, that's a good place to end. I also want to let my listeners know they can learn more about Karen and everything she's been talking about and so much more at KarenBuxman.com, which is Karyn Buxman, BUXMAN.com, and that all of her books are available on her website and through Amazon.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out other interviews that I have posted at FullSpeechAhead.com. You can also check out that same site for information about my coaching and my training in public speaking for you or your work team. I'm also available in a completely different way for my team building course, Teamprovising, where we use games of improvisation to look at teamwork, creativity, and communication. My motivational speeches on risk-taking get the whole audience playing along. More on that at IMPROVentures.com. Full Speech Ahead is a production of Thrive Talk Radio, a collaboration of experts broadcasting together as catalysts for change. We're committed to supporting your highest well-being through limitless possibility, vibrant health, conscious choices, and personal transformation. Our motto is empowered words, empowered lives. More on all our very varied programs at thrivetalkradio.com. For now, I'm Milo Shapiro, always moving, full speech ahead. Till next time.
Not another boring conference.
Liven it up with IMPROVentures and the fun of improvisation. Check out motivational speeches and entertainment that get everyone learning through play and laughter. For smaller groups, Teamprovising is our teamwork and communication program with more feedback and fun. Plus public dynamics, keynotes, training, and coaching on public speaking skills. You can be more effective in front of groups. Learn more today.
IMPROVentures, 619-542-0761, or see videos at IMPROVevents.com.
Got photos that need improvement? Freshen your photo. Old family shots that have gotten damaged? Freshen your photo. Want someone or something removed from a picture? Freshen your photo. At freshenyourphoto.com, we turn the pictures you have into the pictures you want. Add muscle, lose weight, lighten face lines, whiten teeth, fix darker off-color shots. See before and afters from dozens of happy customers at freshenyourphoto.com. That's freshenyourphoto.com.